lunch this afternoon. And again, a very warm thanks to the Airports Company of South Africa for sponsoring lunch this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, just to give you some insights of our program now for the rest of the afternoon, I'm trying to make sure that we have time to get into our glitzy gowns and African attire and into a party mood on time for the gala dinner this evening. So we're going to kick off our program now with our high-level conversation between the various dignitaries who are seated at the front row. From there on, we will have two panel discussions, and thank you very much for the two moderators who've already gathered their panels. And as we continue then to the program, I certainly hope that as the afternoon continues, we'll begin to define what the framework for action becomes as part of this year's Global Aviation Gender Summit. As we near the end of the day as well, we will see if we have time for further questions. But to those of you with questions, you might have noted during the break that I, for instance, have posted on the app wall that what are your thoughts? I will also be opening some of the panels for questions and make sure that some of the moderators are able to see your comments and take them further from there. I'm going to allow our panel to sit. Thank you very much. And we will then wind to a close for the purposes of today. A few of you have brought questions to us, and thank you very much for those. I'm now going to hand the stage over to Ms. Glenda Newton, who is going to facilitate our next high-level discussion. Please give our panel guests a very warm round of applause.
No. No.
Testing. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. So welcome. This is a fantastic panel. I think this will be the highlight of our day. We would like to welcome Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka from the Executive Director of UN Women. We would like to welcome Ms. Chikunga, the Deputy Minister here in South Africa, and Dr. Liu, the Secretary General of ICAO. I'm going to ask the panel individually questions very much related to what we're talking about today, yesterday, and tomorrow. And from their perspective, their ideas on gender mainstreaming, SDGs. So if I could start with yourself, Executive Director. Would you mind, well, first, we're very pleased to have you here. Former Deputy President of South Africa. You're joining us on South African Women's Day at the inaugural Global Aviation Gender Summit. Thank you. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda was historic. It affirmed the crucial importance of gender equality and sustainable development. And we are almost 3 years into the implementation of the agenda. What are some of the challenges that you feel remain? And what can we do to ensure that we meet the 2030 Agenda?
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Usually this time of the day is the graveyard session, as they say, where people take a nap. So we have to try and be as exciting as possible to stop you from napping. And I'd like to thank the my colleague. We sit together in the cabinet of the United Nations. It's nice to have her in my own hometown. Thank you so much for including me in this session. Thank you also, Minister from the Department of Transport and the Civil Aviation Authority in UNESCO, another United Nations entity. So I'm so glad that the UN is visible in South Africa, in my home country. So I will... We are earning our keep. Back to the question, all of you would be aware that in 2015, all countries that are members of the United Nations agreed on 17 goals that by 2030 should give us enhanced quality of life that will impact on the largest number of people on the planet. The agenda, sometimes called Agenda 2030, with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, with an emphasis also on climate change, addressing the negative impacts of climate change, and on peace, has a very significant impact on women. One of the goals is dedicated to women, Goal 5, but each of the goals have something to offer to make the quality of life better. In the context of the conversation we are having today, addressing the women in the aviation industry, this really talks about enabling women to be in jobs, in careers, that would enhance their quality of life so that they're not in the bottom of the pyramid as poor people, as people who are in low-paid jobs, and as people who are not making a significant contribution in society. With these goals, how could we therefore make sure that we support the aviation industry? Education is important. There is a goal on education. You saw the presentation earlier about education. We need to do much better on education. We need to improve literacy level of women because mothers are the ones who facilitate the education and learning of their children. We still have too many girl children that are out of school, notwithstanding that we are making progress. The goals also talk about inclusive economies, where as many people as possible have decent employment and sustainable incomes. We don't have enough of decent jobs in the world today. Even when women do work, there's still unequal pay. There are many sectors where there is no minimum wage. So again, these are areas where we need to bring about change. When we looked at what has been happening as we have been implementing the Sustainable Development Goals 3 years later in relation to women and girls, we found that the biggest problem is that the initiatives that we're making are too small and too slow. So there are two words for Sustainable Development Goals that we need to pay attention to: acceleration and scale. And we also found that the poorest people on earth right now are girls between the ages of 25 and 35. This is the age group where women are having children, they are having families, and they have to choose sometimes between taking care of the family and going to the labor market. When they leave the labor market, chances are that they will never go back again, and then they become stuck in a poverty trap. So addressing the barriers to sustained presence in the market of women is important. Childcare, biggest barrier to gender equality. It also leads women to be dependent on their partners if they are unable to stay in a job, and that exposes them to violence because they become dependent on their partners. So all of these goals are linked. We need to address all the goals together.
Thank you. Secretary General, ICAO, as a UN agency, specialized agency, what do you feel the role is of ICAO in advocating gender equality, specifically within the global aviation sector? And this summit has touched on the challenges related to women in aviation. From ICAO's perspective, what do you see as the greatest challenge? And what partnerships do you think we can foster to encourage overcoming these challenges?
Thank you. It's a very good question. Good afternoon. Dear friends and colleagues, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank sincerely Executive Director of United Nations Women for her to accepting our invitation to participate in this inaugurate Global Aviation Gender Summit in her home country. I still remember that when I first time made this invitation, she has no hesitation and accepted this invitation, and she made it from her very tight schedule. Thank you so much. And also, it's my also great pleasure to have Deputy Minister of Transport to join us this afternoon, and also from her very tight schedule, and together to make this panel. Certainly, ICAO, as UN specialized agency, has an important role in advocating gender equality as UN Sustainable Development Goal number 5, as just the Executive Director mentioned, which are clearly indicated in the UN 2030 Agenda for SDGs. However, I have to say, this role ICAO is to play cannot be done alone. Its responsibility shared by member states, by industry, by the other stakeholders of aviation, and of course, by ICAO. So we have a shared responsibility. As you also know, ICAO at its 39th assembly, which was held in 2016, our 192 member states adopted a resolution to enhance gender equality in aviation sector. It's clear indicated that member states committed to promote gender equality at the global level, and also member states committed to show determined leadership to promote and accelerate this gender equality process in the global aviation sector. And after adopting this Assembly resolution, ICAO adopted a gender equality program, which included more than 50 concrete actions, which will be carried out in the coming 3 years. This gender equality program is to enhance the gender equality within ICAO, but also to promote at the global level in all the sectors of our 192 member states in aviation, in order to prepare our sector for growth of our traffic volume and to incorporate this very important gender equality program and component into this journey. And I would like to also emphasize that this gender equality is not only is the right thing we need to do, but also there is needs. As we know, in the coming less than 15 years, our global traffic volume will be doubling. That means we need high qualified aviation professionals as next generation to join us. It's a great opportunity for us to accelerate gender equality, taking the opportunity of we are hiring the new generation to our sector. So that's why it's extremely important we work together, not only from government level, but also industry, education, and also general public to work together to promote gender equality in order to change our sector to be more balanced and in order to create better future of our global sector.
Deputy Minister, thank you. Thank you for hosting this wonderful event. I think a lot of us, many of us, it's our first trip to South Africa, and the welcome has been enormously warm. Thank you. As the Deputy Minister of Transport here in South Africa, would you share with us a little bit of how SDG number 5, the gender equality SDG, has been advocated in the aviation sector within South Africa? And what would you consider the greatest challenge for gender equality incorporation? And what partnerships do you think you would look forward to moving forward in South Africa?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure that's working. Thank you very much, ma'am. I think first it's proper that I, on behalf of the women of the world, women of the world.
Well, your mic's not on. Sorry. One moment, please. Sorry.
Don't fall.
Thank you very much. Is it working now?
Yep. Yep.
Hello. I'm saying, I think on behalf of the women of the world, women of Africa and women of South Africa, we appreciate the presence of one of our own, the former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mayor Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. A seasoned woman, a struggle activist, a women emancipation activist. We're happy to have her amongst us here. We can only appreciate her presence and be humbled by her presence. I think as a country, we have actually created an environment that is conducive to the implementation of their goals. We have passed quite a number of legislations and policies. I tabulated those yesterday in my speech. We already have an aviation transformation strategy that we are implementing. We therefore can say, in terms of policies, in terms of legislations, in terms of strategies, we have an environment that says we can do it. Where then are the challenges? For me, it would look like the challenges are along the whole value chain, starting from the family. If at the family level we say you cannot be an aeronautical engineer, then a child can also think that, a girl child can think that she cannot therefore be an aeronautical engineer. However, we can intervene at a school level. But if the school does not provide the child with proper subjects that will enable her to choose aeronautical engineering as the career, that will also create a problem, but we can also intervene. Because I think at that level, the child who may have wanted maybe to do engineering, but because of sharp subjects, she's not able to do that, but can actually study law and be an aviation lawyer, can actually study economics and be an aviation economist. And therefore, there will always be a point of intervention at that level. It could be that, like it has been indicated, the child is not able to do that because of funds. would have wanted to be a pilot but does not have money to pay for the flying hours. That might also be a challenge, but I think we can always intervene, both as government, as private sector, as state-owned companies, as stakeholders. So for me, there is always a point of intervention for as long as there is will from ourselves as government, as policymakers, but from the communities as well, from the stakeholders as well, and that can actually take us forward. So we have done all this as a country, but like I indicated yesterday, we don't think that out of the actions that we have taken, out of the investment that we have made, we have what we want to have.
And if I can just ask, the partnerships that you might think of, there are partnerships outside of your own country. Do you think that there's areas for development there?
Definitely. We have our state-owned companies in the aviation sector. We have our institutions of higher learning in the country, universities. We can work together with them. We have our airlines, for instance, that are operating within the country, our own national airline, SAA. I believe we can work together with those. If we put our heads together, we put our investment together, we say we are determined to change this, to bring this equity in this sector, we can do it. For me, as the department, I'm as the Deputy Minister in the Department of Transport, I sit here and say, yes, we're talking about aviation, but the same thing will be said about maritime, for instance. How best do we therefore approach transport and emancipate transport sector in order to bring women on board such that they too can find a space within the transport sector, but within the aviation sector in particular today. We can do it, it can be done, and I think this marks the beginning of that or the continuation of what we have started, but we think that it has not yielded the results that we want, but we're getting there.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very inspiring. So we're moving on to question 2. Executive Director. The UN Secretary General has prioritized the attainment of gender parity within the UN system with the development and implementation of a system-wide strategy on gender parity. We understand this as UN SWAP. What are some of the successes and challenges within the UN system that has faced achieving gender parity? And what lessons can you share with the public and private sector to increase the representation of women in an underrepresented field such as aviation?
Thank you. Just want to start by emphasizing, am I audible? Yes, Waka. Nyangtola. I want to start by picking up on the last question and just emphasizing the fact that there's something we can do about the problem. The fact that we have about, 5% of women who are pilots, for instance, should not be the problem of government alone and of young people who want to enter the industry. The industry as a whole, in all its formation, needs to work together to solve the problems. I think that airlines have a responsibility to support the training and to make sure that students don't only end up with theory without the practice and the requisite hours. They must invest, and public policy must force them to do this. So each airline produces a percentage of the required number of skills for the industry. And within that, there must also be a set percentage for women. Otherwise, if you do not have special measures, we're not going to crack this. We see it with the representation of women. Where we don't have quotas and special measures, you just do not reach the level of representation of women anywhere. So I think that there is something that needs to be done at a public policy levels and the enforcement thereof. Also, I think that teachers are an important role player in this. Investment in teachers who are adequately trained to teach STEM subjects in the poorest parts of our communities is actually a critical investment. And those teachers must not only be competent as teachers in the STEM subjects, but also must understand gender equality so that they themselves do not become part of the problem. They must become enablers. I think that would be one of the biggest barrier that we could remove if we invested on the teachers so that we can enhance the pipeline. And of course, parents. In the same way that when a mother goes to prenatal clinic and is told about vaccination and the other nutrition, the other important things that a mother has to know, I feel that the extent to which there's gender inequality, when a mother is going to have a child, they must know that there's something called gender inequality that could destroy the future of their child. So nurses themselves and practitioners in the health sector need themselves to be empowered with some capacity for gender equality, because the problem is so complex, we actually need a comprehensive response. To your question on parity in the UN. The United Nations is 72 years old now, and old institutions are very difficult to turn around. For the first time this year, we reached gender parity at what, if we were a country, is a cabinet of the UN, which is the agencies. Me and her, we are heads of agencies, and there's about 68 agencies of the UN. You probably know the more visible ones, such as UNESCO, WHO, UNAIDS, and so on, but there's 68 of them. So for the first time in 72 years, we achieved gender parity, and it was achieved in 1 year. Secretary General, who when she, as you remember, there was a strong contestation for the General Secretary, we were campaigning for a woman. He said, I've got the job, I'm not a woman, but I'm gonna be good for women. And he has proved himself. Gender parity in the UN was one of the promises that he made and that he's keeping. Obviously, still have a long way to go, because it's one thing to reach parity at the top. There's many other layers of the United Nations where we're still fighting, but he has set the tone. We know now as heads of agencies, wherever you work, whether we are in peacekeeping, where the majority of the personnel tends to be male from the people that you get from member states, you have to see how we are going to make it happen. He expects you to reach certain targets by a certain time frame, and you have to account on a regular basis. So parity is achieved in the institution through a top-down and a bottom-up approach. You actually also need the people within the institutions to demand of the institutions for parity. So you need your unions, you need your women's caucus within an institution. All of these put together make it happen. In the UN, we have the United Nations Feminist Network. They within the UN are also a pressure group. So the progress that we're making, and we still have a long way to go, is due to the fact that there's pressure up and pressure out and pressure in the middle. But also this leadership and representation of women needs to be transformative. It should not just be about the numbers of women. We women must actually make a difference. For this industry, for instance, I would like to highlight, as I would highlight for the United Nations, because we have a big problem of sexual harassment. We also have, in your case, the issue of human trafficking, which the industry needs to address, because a significant number of people who are trafficked are trafficked through the airline industries. I believe the numbers are about 500,000 per year under your watch. So there's a partnership that is required by policymakers, practitioners, and everybody in order to make sure so that leadership and adequate representation of women is about women making sure that no girl child will be found in the cargo, being moved from one country to another for purposes that are unacceptable to all of us. Sexual harassment in the industry. I have been told that about 68% of women who work in the industry have experienced sexual harassment of one sort or the other. 38% of them are cabin attendants. Groping, touching, unwarranted kissing, all kinds of remarks and language that is unacceptable. And when they report to the industry, it is not seen as something that is too serious. Kenzane died because probably she did not know how to talk about this problem that she has. It starts somewhere in a sexual harassment, in touching, and then men begin to think that it's okay to talk to women like this. If as employers we don't nip it in the bud and tell them that it is unacceptable to treat women like this, we actually allow them to become monsters. So whether you are in aviation, you are in the United Nations, you are in education, you are in government, we need each other to address this. Wherever we are, we need to put our foot down and say this is unacceptable. Thank you.
Very good. Secretary General. Thank you very much, Secretary General. Strengthening accountability for gender equality commitments at all levels and all industries is critical to advancing gender equality and women empowerment. As a specialized UN agency responsible for reporting numbers in regards to gender representation as a UN entity, would you say that the framework has been effective in mainstreaming gender perspectives throughout ICAO's work? And how do you think ICAO could support greater coherence and accountability of the gender-related work among other entities or other aviation sector organizations?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate United Nations Women for this UN system-wide gender action plan, which actually sets out key performance indicators provided for benchmarking, and also set up objectives, of course. ICAO is part of a UN system. We also developed our action plan according to the United Nations Women's standardized approaches. And we also, with the assistance of the United Nations Women, developed a gender equality program in ICAO. We also set very clear key performance indicators, objective, and of course, and also for the responsible entities, and to each bureau and offices, and in order we can achieve the goal. And this gender equality program also includes a committee. I personally chair that committee. And also, as you know, I'm the first female Secretary General of ICAO over 70 years. Gender equality is my personal priority and commitment. And I'm a firm advocate for the enhancement of gender equality and women empowerment in the aviation sector. And this summit is one of the milestones, I have to say, in the ICAO and aviation history with the support of South Africa. And this certainly demonstrates that South Africa is a front runner of gender equality in general, and also in aviation in particular. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Deputy Minister for your very strong support for this event. And I want to also mention Poppy Cancer and for Director Civil Aviation Authority for her initiative, for her support, and to make it happen in South Africa. And for the gender equality program, I think that one of the challenges for aviation sector we are facing, that is traditionally aviation, due to its highly technical nature, in the certain functions and certain positions dominated by male professionals. And during this 2 days event, we already had lots of discussions. We identified the barriers and also challenges. And these barriers reflected we have limited pool and in the technical field. For instance, in ICAO, from our workforce, if we're taking into account all the workforce in ICAO, we have the balance 46%. It's almost 50%. However, if we look at technical field of ICAO positions, which only represent 19% of female occupy technical positions, then with regard to the senior positions, few positions occupied by the female. So I think this more or less reflected our sector's situation. What I think we would like to do, and also would like to have your support and your assistance. As I said, this UN system-wide gender streamlining action plan, if we can make this action plan at the country level and taking aviation as one of the sector, and then if we can also take some volunteer states join us, and we can have this kind of example, the pilot project, and set clear key performance indicators and outcomes, and also, of course, the objective, and we can monitor the progress. And then we can put a very clear the objective we are going to do in the coming 3 years, or 5 years, maybe 10 years, until 2030. So if we can do this, I think we can have a very concrete progress. And also, like you said, we put concrete targets. And by doing that, I believe the pool of aviation professional, in particular female professional, will be steadily increased. And then for ICAO, we can have, I believe, much more high qualified candidates, and also professional will be appointed at the position in ICAO, and in particular on the senior positions. So then we'll not only have women, but also competent, qualified women to occupy our senior positions, no matter at the international level, as ICAO, and all national level, at the civil aviation authorities, or the industry, the airport, airlines, or air navigation service providers. And I see this is a great opportunity, even though it's a challenge, but we need to turn challenge into the opportunities. And like you just mentioned, education, I believe we also should to strengthen the partnership between aviation sector, like airport, airlines, and the government, with education entity, universities. And also, I think we need to start like using our industry and as well as civil aviation authorities to educate, to engage the high schools, primary school students, to inspire them what is the aviation, what's their future of a career, and could be, and because we have a great market and demand in our industry, and also we have such decent jobs waiting for them. So by doing this enhanced partnership, I think we can make our sector work more closely with the education sector, thereby to produce high qualified professionals which can meet the demands in the coming years, as we just mentioned, where our traffic volume will be doubling. Nowadays, 100,000 daily flights. By 2030, it will be becoming 200,000 daily flights. And nowadays, we have more than 3,900 airports, 1,400 airlines. We have more than 26,000 aircrafts and more than 173 air navigation service providers. And all this, not only we need the pilots, we also need mechanics, we also need lawyers, we need economists, we need financial people, and all kinds of experts and professionals. So it's a huge market. So that's why I think it's extremely important we can work together. And talking about that, ICAO has another program that is Next Generation of Aviation Professional. So we would like to strengthen the partnership between the civil aviation authorities and the industry and with the aviation, with the education sector. We want to promote and encourage education to establish a network to promote that. And for that sense, I would also take this opportunity to thank our industry partner, ACI and IATA and Iowa, for them to cooperate with us, to partner with us. We provide the fellowship to our young professional, in particular for the female professional, and let them to have job training for 1 year and in our 3 organizations, and provide opportunity for the young professionals. And I would like to encourage other private sector industry to cooperate with us to enlarge these opportunities. In particular, if we can enlarge this opportunity for the female and professional and young girls can do this kind of professional training in our organization. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Deputy Minister, we've gone a little bit off script. So I'm going to actually ask you a question which is relevant to where the direction of the conversation has gone, because I think it's actually very interesting, and it's been a common thread that we're seeing from yesterday's presentations till today, and it has to do with data and reporting and statistics. Within South Africa aviation sector, I assume that there's a good collection of data and gender data. As a member of the global community, would you value a transparent and sharing model of data across the world in regards to gender? How would that benefit yourself in making decisions around mainstreaming gender?
Yes, thank you very much. We are collecting data. Our state-owned companies are doing it. We have State South Africa that is collecting data. We have our tertiary institutions doing the same. So we have a lot of data that we are collecting as a country. We believe that ICAO should be a repository of data that is collected. And we think that it should be shared amongst countries for proper use, of course. We believe that if we were to do that, we would actually promote things such as sharing of expertise, for instance. We can actually prevent duplication between countries. We can also maybe fast-track even decision-making. Just want to cite an example. For instance, last year, South Africa was audited for safety in the aviation by ICAO. In regulations or legislation, for instance, we scored 100%. And you will have, I thought somebody was going to upload for that, 100%. And we actually increased our performance from 83.3% to 87.3% overall. Now, it cannot be that in the same region, for instance, SADC region, or in the same continent, you have countries that do not perform in that ICAO audit, because we have the experience. We are preparing for our security audit by ICAO again. Surely there may be some other countries in the region or in the continent that have had this audit. I think we can actually share that information with them. On issues of skills, for instance, we will have our own challenges. We keep on saying, as South Africa, our pilots have a challenge in accumulating the flying hours, as our former Deputy President has indicated, the Executive Director of UN Women. But you have countries that have a curriculum that make this not to be a problem. The hours are part of the very implementation of theory and so on. So you accumulate the hours as you get theory. If we were to know about these things, we would share that information so that we restructure our curriculum as a country. So if we share information, we get to know the best practices from other countries, and we can actually adopt that as a country. So I believe that we should be sharing information, but that should happen properly so that information is not abused for other purposes by even those that might want to do whatever. But I think that will be our stance on the matter.
Does anyone have any other comments to make?
Maybe just on this one. For instance, South Africa became the first country to have regulations on remotely piloted aircrafts. We are already amending the legislations. Many countries are still struggling to regulate this. I think even ICAO, I think, has not had that. So I think even ICAO can learn from South Africa if we share this, if we share the challenges that we are already having with the regulations, hence we are amending them. We focus, for instance, on operators and left behind the manufacturers of these unmanned aircrafts. And these, we know the challenges that we're experiencing with that. We can share that information with whoever. But if it is our own information, other countries will repeat what we have experienced as challenges, what probably we have corrected, and so on. So we believe that if we share information, but it's done properly, that can actually take us forward, even in terms of gender equity.
Excellent example.
I just want to reinforce the important role of people who are already in management and in senior positions of the industry, to mentor, to encourage, to coach, as Montla was saying, so that every young person who enters the industry feels looked after and is encouraged to stay, so that people don't enter the industry and then you lose them again, because it's an important big step that they already are in there. To lose them, and especially to lose women and any other minority group is quite a waste. So it becomes important for those that are in to lift as they climb, but also to help to sustain those that are in emotionally, making sure that they become more competent, and to show them the direction. But particular, I want to appeal to men who are a majority of the people in the industry. They can bring about a lot of changes by making sure that they use the networks and their dominance in the industry to work for gender equality. We have a campaign as UN Women called He for She, Men Who Stand for Gender Equality, and I'd like to welcome to pin you as a He for She, but it's always based on the actions that you take that bring about gender equality where you are positioned. So I think the two of us will learn he for she for aviation industry to give you an opportunity to shine as men in the aviation industry.
It's key. Go ahead.
Maybe to add also the whole issue around enterprise development in the aviation sector. You know, if you go to airports, there are so many enterprises that are operating within the sector. And of those, how many are women and are owned by women? And I think that is also equally important, that we ensure that women also operate within the sector, within our airports, that they are entrepreneurs in there, and we make it possible for them to gain entry. Otherwise, it remains men owning all those enterprises or whatever, and women not being there. And I think that will be important that we also look into all those issues to say, now you have women, they want to be entrepreneurs. How do we ensure that they also gain entry into the sector?
This is a very important topic, or something you've touched on. You spoke about it before. It's the value chain, and this is part of the value chain. That aviation, the aviation sector goes beyond pilots and air traffic controllers. There's a whole big branch that the Secretary General referred to, you know, legal, you referred to it as well, economists, entrepreneurs. So a lot of thinking can go into having women involved in the aviation sector and contributing to the industry. Yes, please.
Before concluding, from my part, I would take this opportunity again to thank South Africa government, in particular Minister of Transport and the Deputy Minister of Transport, and also DG of Civil Aviation Authorities and the Chairman of the Civil Aviation Authorities, and also for all the participants to participate in this meeting. And also I would thank UN Women, in particular Executive Director, and thank for UNESCO to partner with us to allow this event happen in this beautiful city, Cape Town. And also, I would like to expect tomorrow when we conclude the meeting, we could have a roadmap with concrete practical actions, and which can provide to the civil aviation authorities, governments, and the industry, and maybe the education, so we can work together. Another one, I think I'm very glad that through this summit, we strengthen the partnership with UN Women. Just the UN Executive Director mentioned he and she, and we are going to promote this in our aviation sector. And also, I hope at our proposal for the UN system-wide action plan could be introduced at the country level. You may take aviation as one of the sector as a pilot project and select some states. And we will work together and with the UN Women. So your support, I hope our aviation sector will have a better balanced sector in the future.
Thank you very much. Let's say a really warm thank you to the panel. This was a very privilege for us to actually witness this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tech desk, my roving mic, please.